My name's Narina. 5 years ago, I got a message from my mom inviting me home for dinner. Nothing unusual, just a Sunday night with the family. I figured we'd talk about grad school apps or maybe the color scheme for Zenaya's wedding. I even picked up dessert on the way, thinking I'd surprise them with something sweet. But what happened that night, it broke something inside me. Not in the loud movie scene way, not in an explosion. It cracked quietly, like hairline fractures you don't see until the structure gives way. They were all sitting in the living room when I arrived. Dad, Emmerich, and Zenaya. No kitchen sounds, no smells of dinner, no laughter, just silence, and a tension so thick it felt like walking into a staged play. Dad didn't even stand up. "You're late," he said flatly. "Traffic," I answered, smiling lightly, trying to keep things light. But no one smiled back. Zenaya avoided my eyes completely, her jaw clenched like it was holding back fire. Emer leaned back into the cushions, smug, like he'd just played a winning hand. "Sit down," Dad said. That's when I knew something was wrong. I sat near the window, sunlight pouring in behind me, casting their faces in shadow. The whole room felt off balance. And then Emmerich opened his mouth. "You've been stealing from Mom and Dad's retirement account." He slid a bank printout toward me, a bright orange highlighter. Circle around a single withdrawal. Before I could even speak, Dad held up a hand. Silence. Then Zenaya jumped in. "She's been sleeping with that married doctor at Banner, and she tried to come on to my fiancé. He told me everything." It hit me so fast I couldn't breathe. I looked at them, my family, people who had watched me grow up, people I'd loved, and asked, "You actually believe this?" "Don't lie," Mom said. Still no eye contact, just her voice, cold and clipped. "You've changed. You're not the same person anymore." "No one even asked me," I said. "You're sitting here throwing out accusations like you already know the truth." "We've made a decision," Dad cut in. "We're removing you from the family trust, and we think it's best you leave, tonight." I blinked. "You have 1 hour," Emir added casually, like he was announcing dinner reservations. "It's already packed," Zenaya said, proud, like she'd been waiting to say it. I stood up, walked right past them. No one looked at me, not even Mom. In the garage, Dad was tossing something into the trash. It was my photo album. "My baby pictures?" I asked. He shrugged. "Didn't think you'd need it." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I got in my car and just drove. I ended up at a motel on Van Buren, one of those places with buzzing neon and air conditioners that sound like dying insects. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. That's when I felt it. Not pain, something deeper, heavier. A pull. I did the math in my head. I walked to the nearest gas station and bought a pregnancy test. Back in that bathroom, under a weak yellow light, I watched 2 pink lines appear. Positive. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "You're not alone." Then I said it louder, to the life growing inside me. "You're the only truth they can't erase." The room reeked of bleach. My hands trembled. On the table beside me, the test box lay open, instructions forgotten. I pulled out a leather-bound diary from the bottom of my bag, something I hadn't touched in years. Flipping through it, I found old entries about late-night cafe shifts, study notes, and texts with Camden before we ever admitted how we felt. Then I stopped on an entry that felt like a punch to the gut. March 12th, junior year. Emmerich asked me to explain our gene splicing capstone. I walked him through it, line by line. At the presentation, he repeated my entire section, word for word. The professor praised his initiative. Dad printed the email and framed it. I slammed the journal shut. I remembered standing in the living room, watching Mom clap like Emmerich had cured cancer. Me? I stood invisible. I flipped to another entry. Grandma gave me her wedding ring, a sapphire set in a worn gold band. Zenaya told everyone Grandma only gave it to me because I wasn't pageant pretty. Later, at the will reading, she wore that very ring. Grandma said it goes to the first daughter who gets married, she claimed. No one questioned it. And I stayed silent. Back in the motel, I picked up the pregnancy test again. Still positive. Still real. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unsaved number. "I'm coming to Tucson. If it's true, you're not alone." Camden. He knew. I hadn't told him, but he knew. For the first time since that night, I felt something inside me steady. He still saw me. He always had. When the knock came, I opened the door to find him standing there. Gray shirt, tan lines, eyes soft and certain. "You okay?" he asked. I couldn't speak, just stepped aside to let him in. He sat quietly near the window. I stayed perched on the bed. The silence between us was full of unspoken things, shared grief, unshed tears. I didn't think you'd come, I whispered. He looked at the test on the table. No shock, no panic. Want to get out of here for a bit? He asked. I nodded. We drove in his old Ford truck to a diner with cracked booths and a waitress who didn't look twice at us. He ordered 2 black coffees. When they came, he looked me in the eyes. You don't owe me anything. I'm pregnant. I said it flatly. No buildup. He didn't blink. Just pulled a pen from his jacket, wrote a word on a napkin, and slid it across the table. I stared at it. He reached out and said, I'm not running. Not from you. Not from this. I gave a shaky laugh. You don't know what you're signing up for. Maybe not, but I know what I walked away from. Then he told me about his family, old money, Ivy League futures, their plans for him, the girl they wanted him to marry, the company they expected him to run. But he'd left it all. I saw what happened at the university pitch, he said. Your brother stole your work. I knew it was yours. My hands tightened around my coffee. Emer never credited me. They believed him more than they believed you, Camden said. I looked out the window. Zenaya used to call me the weird one. Said I liked books more than parties. She hated that you didn't need her approval. We sat for a long time. I told him everything. The trust, the accusations, the packed bag, the motel, the test. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I think I'd cried out everything before I even walked into that house. When we left, the sky was a wash of gold and pink. Camden reached for my hand. I'm not asking you to forgive them, he said, but I'd like to help you build something better. I didn't answer. But I didn't let go. The next morning, I woke up in Camden's apartment. Not his actual bedroom. He gave me the pull-out couch. The blinds were half closed, letting in just enough sun to warm the cheap tile floor. It wasn't fancy, paint peeling in the corners, a leaky faucet that whined like it needed coffee, but it was quiet. And for the first time in weeks, I hadn't woken up gasping. I sat up slowly, my hands instinctively resting on my belly. It was early, nothing to see yet, but I felt them. There was a note on the counter, written in his sharp, slanted handwriting. Went out for coffee. Don't leave without eating. I smiled, a real one this time. Then I checked my phone. Dozens of notifications. Messages from a world I didn't belong to anymore. Zenaya's Instagram. Filtered brunch shots and captions about grace under pressure. Emmerich had posted a picture at our parents' house. His caption, family isn't blood, it's loyalty. I hadn't even realized it was Sunday again. I opened my contacts. My thumb hovered over their names. Mom, Dad, Emmerich, home. Then, one by one, I hit delete. Not out of anger, not even sadness. I just needed to stop searching for pieces of myself in people who had chosen to stop seeing me. Later that afternoon, I called a women's clinic in Phoenix. When they asked for a name, I paused, then said, and Elena Mason. I don't know where it came from. It just fit. The waiting room was a snapshot of survival. A teenager biting her hoodie sleeve. A middle-aged woman staring at nothing, her face drawn from hunger, or maybe something harder. I sat in between them, holding a folder of prenatal care materials, listening to the buzz of a vending machine that sounded more alive than I felt. No emergency contact, no family insurance, just me and the future I was quietly stitching together. When I walked out, the Arizona sun hit my face like a reminder. I wasn't just carrying a child. I was carrying a future. One no one else would get to shape but me. Weeks passed, slowly, then all at once. Camden let me stay. No strings. He never tried to rescue me, just handed me the space to heal. He cooked when I couldn't, drove me to appointments, built shelves in the closet for baby supplies we hadn't even bought yet, and I started building again. I dusted off my old thesis notes, the ones on hormone response diagnostics, research I'd once pitched for a medical startup that my family never believed in. Phoenix Biotech, that was the name. Not because I was trying to be clever, but because that city had scorched me bare and still, I'd risen again. It started as a side project, one prototype in a shared lab, no office, no website, just an idea. But it was mine. I filed the paperwork, applied for grants, resubmitted the NIH application Emer had once hijacked for his team, this time with just my name on it. The first check came months later. It wasn't big, but it was real. And that's when I knew. I no longer needed their name. I had my own. The day of the Regional Medical Innovations Conference arrived fast. I zipped up a navy blazer over my growing stomach and smoothed my hair in the mirror. I didn't look like a legacy. I looked like someone who had clawed her way back into the light. Camden parked the truck a few blocks away. I told him I wanted to walk in alone. Not for drama, for ownership. But nothing could have prepared me for what stood outside the conference hall. A 10-foot silk banner, perfectly lit. And Women Leading the Future of Health, sponsored by the Zenaya Sloan Foundation. And there she was, Zenaya, perfectly posed, arms crossed like armor, lips curled in a smirk I knew too well. Below the image were words from my original thesis, word for word. No credit. No mention of me, or Phoenix Biotech. I stood still so long that someone brushed past me and muttered, "You good?" I nodded. But I wasn't. Inside, the conference room buzzed. Investors, scientists, journalists. I walked toward the stage without looking back at the banner, like it was just a background prop and not the theft of my work. The moderator called my name. I stepped up. Slide 1, hormonal response data. Slide 2, clinical trials in underserved communities. Slide 3, a photo. Me, holding my belly. A sticky note on the mirror beside me. You're not invisible. They just can't see what you're building yet. I took a breath. I wasn't invited to this panel, I said, but I'm the one who built the science being funded here today, not with a legacy name, not with inherited trust, but with a body no one believed in and a voice they tried to silence. The room froze. No one moved. Final slide, an email thread. Time-stamped. 3 years before Zenaya's foundation was even registered. Every attachment was in my name. When I walked off stage, Camden was waiting. He'd uploaded the full recording. I didn't need to ask. His text buzzed in my hand before I reached him. The right twin built it. That night, the video went viral. By the time we returned to the truck, the sun was slipping behind downtown Phoenix, painting the sky in fire and long shadows. That's when I saw it. Spray painted across the windshield. Backstabber and trash mom. Shame to the name. Camden was already pulling out his phone, furious. I moved past him. Tucked beneath the windshield wiper was an envelope. My name written in perfect cursive. I opened it. A cease and desist letter, accusing me of defamation, threatening legal action. Signed, Zenaya. Camden looked at me. Do you want to call the police? I didn't answer. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, thicker than hers, heavier. Screenshots, emails, grant files, advisor testimonials. All time-stamped. All mine. I tucked it back under my arm. Let her try, I said. Let her swing first. Camden just stared at me. I smiled. Because this time, I'd brought fire. The lawsuit had been ready for months. I'd written it in silence, tucked it into folders, buried it beneath appointments and ultrasounds and moments when I wasn't sure I had the strength to be anything other than a mother-to-be. But now it had a pulse. That night I hit send, and everything moved faster than I expected. The silence with my family, the kind that used to hum like static in the background, turned into subpoenas. The ache I'd carried in my chest for 5 years morphed into exhibits. The sleepless nights? Depositions. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like finally telling the truth on record, in ink. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror and buttoned the same navy blazer my mother once said looked too harsh for a woman. She'd meant it as an insult, but standing there, staring at my reflection, all I saw was power. Not softness. Not apology. Formidable. The Phoenix courthouse didn't look like much. Beige walls, flickering lights, the faint scent of old files and desert dust. But that morning, the whole building seemed to buzz. Every bench was filled. Lawyers in tight suits, journalists pretending not to take notes, strangers who probably wandered in for drama and stayed for justice. Camden sat 2 rows behind me. No tie, just presence. That was more than enough. My attorney, Renee, had the kind of calm that made you believe she'd fought wars before breakfast. She leaned over and said, "You ready to let this breathe?" I nodded once. She stood. "Your Honor," Renee began, her voice slicing through the courtroom like a scalpel. "We are not only alleging intellectual property theft. We are also submitting formal testimony from a former NIH grant officer confirming that the defendant, Miss Zenaya Sloan, used research authored solely by my client, Narina Sloan, to secure federal funding and nonprofit status under fraudulent pretenses." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Chairs shifted. A throat cleared. The judge, a black woman with tightly braided hair and a gaze that missed nothing, nodded. Proceed. And then the doors opened. Zanea walked in. Cream sheath dress, dark sunglasses, heels that clicked like she was walking into a press junket, not a reckoning. She looked around. Her eyes landed on Camden. Her jaw clenched. She hadn't expected him to be here. That was her first mistake. Her lawyers went into damage control immediately. All smiles, all spin. This is a sad misunderstanding, one of them said. Siblings, emotions, confusion over joint projects. I stood. The courtroom hushed. I have additional evidence to submit. The judge gestured. Approach. I walked to the bench and handed the clerk a small USB. The judge raised an eyebrow. And what's on this? Audio, I said, from my old bedroom, my mother, my sister, my aunt, discussing how to cut me out of the family trust and take over my research. Silence. The kind that doesn't beg for drama. The kind that announces truth. I saw it ripple through the room. Not shock, but recognition. Like everyone had known something like this once. In their family, in their circle. And finally, someone was saying it aloud. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. But my mind flashed to an old memory. Me, maybe 10 years old, sitting on my bed, ear pressed to the wall, hearing my mom's voice drift through the hallway. She's not like the others. She's too difficult, like her father. That night, I'd curled into the smallest version of myself I could manage. But today, I stood tall. The judge looked at the bailiff. We'll recess to review the submitted evidence. In the meantime, I'm issuing a temporary injunction. Miss Sloan, she looked directly at Zanea, is barred from representing, promoting, or financially benefiting from any material tied to Phoenix Biotech or derived from the plaintiff's graduate research. It wasn't an explosion. No gavel bang. No gasps. Just quiet. The kind that settles into your bones. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered like moths to flame. Microphones stretched toward me, questions flying. Do you want to say anything to your sister? I stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, took one breath, then said calm and clear, and I already did, in court. We didn't go out to celebrate. We went back to the lab. Camden had turned part of the living room into a workspace while I was testifying. The twins, Leo and Leora, slept in their bassinets, side by side, wrapped in matching fleece blankets. One of Leora's tiny feet had slipped free. I tucked it back in and kissed her soft, perfect forehead. My phone buzzed on the counter. A name I hadn't seen in years lit up the screen. Dad. I didn't answer. But I opened the email. No subject. Just one line. I hope you're proud. Zanea is gone. We're alone now. No apology. No warmth. Just a sentence tossed like gravel against a closed window. I locked the screen. Set the phone down. Picked up a pipette. The compound I'd been working on for months was ready for final testing, a synthetic protein for early-stage ovarian cancer treatment. I wasn't working in her name. I wasn't doing this for legacy. I was finishing what she never got the chance to become. The drop settled perfectly into the assay. Steady, precise, unshakable. As the first light of dawn crept through the lab windows, I looked over at my children again. Still sleeping, still breathing, soft and sure. I whispered, "We're okay now, all three of us." Later that morning, in the backyard behind Camden's apartment, Leo and Leora sat in the dirt, planting 2 baby citrus trees. Leora declared one was an orange and the other was a lemon, like she'd consulted Mother Nature personally. Camden was stringing up a swing from a pergola beam, dust on his arms, sunlight catching in his hair. It wasn't much, a patch of land behind a worn-out building, but it was ours. And that morning, for the first time in years, I felt something open inside me. A breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding finally exhaled. Then the doorbell rang. On the stoop, a small brown package. No return address. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph, protected by cardboard and plastic. My fingers froze. It was the photo, the one from my 7th birthday, the one that used to hang in the hallway, until the day I realized something strange. I'd been cropped out of it. Only my sleeve remained, like a ghost in the frame. But this was the original. Uncropped, unedited. Me, off-center in a blue dress Grandma had sewn herself. Smiling awkwardly, but there, fully and completely. I turned it over, on the back in small, careful handwriting. And this is the version that matters. See? Camden stepped behind me, brushing sawdust off his palms. I found it in one of Grandma Junior's old albums, he said softly, before the edits. I didn't need to say thank you. He already knew. That afternoon, after the twins were tucked in for their nap, we sat under the pergola, 2 glasses of lemonade, a little breeze, the smell of soil and citrus. Camden looked at me and asked, "Are you okay now?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out at the trees, the swing, the single tiny shoe Leora had forgotten in the planter. Then I looked at my hands, calloused, stained with lab dye, and said, "I'm not just okay, I'm exactly who I was meant to be." He reached for my hand, not to hold it, just to rest his fingers on top of mine, like a quiet promise. A few minutes later, the twins barreled out the door chasing a butterfly. Their laughter floated across the patio like music. I leaned back, breathed deep, and thought, they erased me once. But I didn't come back to be remembered. I came back to build something too real to ignore. 3 weeks later, I stood under the burning Phoenix sun, clipboard in hand, watching as a nurse unpacked a box from Phoenix Biotech. No press, no fanfare, no red ribbon waiting to be cut. Just a small clinic in Midtown. A modest delivery of our first working prototype, a low-cost hormone diagnostic kit built for early detection and accessibility, especially in communities like the one I grew up in. Communities that never get seen. The nurse flipped through the manual, her mouth moving soundlessly as she read words I had written. She paused at affordable detection designed by and for real women, and I saw her expression shift. Yeah. That's when I knew we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Not on magazine covers, not on panels behind podiums lined with flowers and glass water bottles. Right here, making impact one clinic at a time. The next morning, I opened my email and saw a name I hadn't seen in months. Aunt Regina. Subject line, thought you should know. Against my better judgment, I clicked. Zanaya's foundation accounts are frozen. Full audit underway. Your parents are refusing to speak to press or donors. She's disappeared. I don't know where. I won't contact you again. Just thought you should know. No apology. No warmth. Just facts, neatly typed like a quarterly update. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. That chapter was over. Later that evening, I sat cross-legged at our kitchen table while Leo and Leora played nearby with a cheap plastic science kit, food coloring, baking soda, vinegar. To them, it was magic. To me, it was legacy. Not the kind built in glass towers or stitched into dusty family trees, but the kind that giggles when it spills colored water across the tile and says, "Look, Mommy, it's fizzing." Camden called while picking up dinner. "You need to see this," he said, and texted me a link. I opened it. The Phoenix Gala Foundation had posted a new statement on their social media. The comments were turned off. The image showed Zanaya surrounded by reporters, shoulders stiff, sunglasses pushed up like a shield. Caption, effective immediately, all board activities are suspended pending internal review. The Sloan family values transparency and integrity above all. I laughed. Not cruelly, not with glee. With release. The kind that comes when a weight finally rolls off your back and you realize you're still standing. That week, I gave a talk at the local university, a panel on biotech ethics in underserved communities. It wasn't glamorous, just a lecture hall that smelled like dry erase markers and old coffee. When it ended, a girl waited near the door, maybe 19, nervous, fingers fidgeting with the strap of a worn backpack. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. I nodded. "How did you keep going when no one believed you?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, because I knew what I was building mattered more than how they saw me. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Mine nearly did too. After she left, I sat in the empty lecture hall for a while, the fluorescent lights buzzing above like a soft, persistent lullaby. And I thought, forgiveness doesn't always look like a heartfelt apology. Sometimes it's just absence, the stillness that comes when they can't hurt you anymore. That weekend, Camden and I took the twins on a short hike outside Sedona. Nothing strenuous, just red dust trails and smooth rock. Leora insisted on carrying her own backpack, which mostly held snacks and a toy stethoscope. Leo collected smooth stones and asked if they were science. They both fell asleep on the drive back, heads tilted toward each other in the back seat, mouths slightly open, breathing in rhythm. Camden glanced at me, then back at the road. "You okay?" he asked. I looked at the desert stretching around us. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm free." But freedom doesn't stay quiet for long. The next morning, a certified envelope arrived, legal stationery again. I opened it slowly, heart steady. A formal settlement offer. Zanaya, through her attorneys, was offering a significant payout. The catch? I had to drop the lawsuit, sign an NDA, share joint credit for Phoenix Biotech. The nerve, the arrogance. I didn't even hesitate. I drafted a response, attached the deposition, highlighted the key timestamps, and wrote a single note. You can't buy what you didn't build. Then I blocked their number. That same week, I received an invitation from the very biotech conference that had once rejected me outright, back when I was just a girl with a pitch deck and no pedigree. Now, they wanted me as a keynote. I said yes, not for the applause, but because girls like that 19-year-old needed to see what it looked like when someone like them stood center stage. A few nights later, I sat on the floor of our living room, surrounded by sticky note sketches of our next product. Hormone kits designed for teenagers. Discreet, affordable, safe. Something I wish I'd had when I was younger. Leora climbed into my lap, curly hair wild, and said, "When I grow up, I want to do science too." "You already do," I whispered, kissing her cheek. She beamed. Because she believed me. Because of course she did. Why wouldn't she? That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Leo with his stuffed dinosaur, Leora with her plastic beaker, I realized something. I hadn't just rebuilt my life. I had rewritten the entire narrative. No longer the cautionary tale. No longer the black sheep. No longer the ghost in someone else's spotlight. Now, I was the author. And I wasn't done writing yet. The morning of the National Biotech Conference, I stood backstage, hands resting on the cool metal of the podium they'd wheeled into the prep room. The green room buzzed softly. Producers, assistants, someone from catering pouring coffee, but I was still. Behind the curtain, hundreds of people were waiting. Scientists, CEOs, students, press. Not for someone's daughter. Not for someone's sister. For me. When they called my name, I didn't rush out. I walked slowly, deliberately, like every step was an answer to a question no one had dared to ask me before. The lights were bright, but I didn't squint. I'd learned how to stand in light, even if it burned. My first slide appeared behind me. Phoenix Biotech, rooted in resilience, designed for reach. I didn't start with the pain. I didn't need to. I began with data, early hormone detection rates, clinical results from rural trials, the drop in diagnostic costs compared to industry standards. Then I paused, and I told them why I started. I wasn't born into biotech, I said. No one handed me a lab, or a legacy. What I was given was silence, rejection, erasure, and I built something anyway. The room didn't move. Not a cough, not a phone buzz, just breath held, waiting. Then, my final slide. Side-by-side images. On the left, a photo from my old diary, a motel room table, scattered papers, a scribbled lab sketch. On the right, a nurse, smiling, holding the first working Phoenix Biotech prototype. I didn't build this for applause, I said. I built this because no one else would. When I stepped off the stage, some people stood. Others just watched, still. But it wasn't the applause that stayed with me. It was the girl in the third row. Tears in her eyes, a notebook full of ideas in her lap. That evening, after the kids were down for the night, Leo clutching his dinosaur, Leora snoring softly, I joined Camden on the back patio. 2 glasses of wine, a breeze. The citrus trees we planted months ago were beginning to bud. Tiny green bursts, pushing through the branches like they had something to prove. We sat in silence for a while, watching moths dance in the porch light. Then he looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you." I didn't say thank you. I didn't have to. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope, a letter, unopened. The handwriting was unmistakable. Mom. Postmarked 2 weeks ago. No return address. I turned it over, held it for a long moment. Then I said quietly, "I think I'm done reading things from ghosts." And I dropped it into the fire pit beside us. We watched it burn. Not in anger. In peace. A few days later, another parcel arrived. No name, no note. Just a small velvet ring box. Inside, the sapphire ring. Grandma Junior's. The real one. Not the version Zanaya flaunted at the will reading. Not the one they polished for appearances. This one had wear, a scratch across the band, a tiny nick on the edge. Real, worn, honest. I didn't wonder how it found me. I just slipped it on and whispered, "I kept your promise." Time moved on. Quietly, steadily. Phoenix Biotech gained traction. We hired our first 2 employees, leased a small office inside a converted community center. Most days, I still worked from home, Leo and Leora beside me, coloring while I reviewed grant paperwork. Do molecules sleep? Leo asked one afternoon. Only when you do, I smiled. One morning, while sorting the mail, I found another envelope. Legal stationery again. I sighed, already bracing. But it wasn't what I expected. It was a withdrawal of suit. From Zenaya's attorneys. No settlement, no admission, just a quiet folding of a bad hand. Attached was a formal statement. And our client is stepping away from all public engagements indefinitely. That evening, I walked barefoot into our backyard. Leora chased fireflies across the lawn. Leo gave them names. Tiny, Flash, Zipper. Camden looked up from a lawn chair and smiled. You look lighter, he said. I sat beside him, laying my head on his shoulder. I think I finally put it all down, I said. What? The weight, I whispered, of needing to be believed, of needing to be enough. He nodded, didn't press. And in that silence, I understood something I hadn't before. It had never really been about them. It was about me, choosing who I would be without their permission. The next morning, I walked the twins to preschool. Leora had a sparkly backpack. Leo carried a plastic dinosaur. Before I left, their teacher pulled me aside. They told the class what you do for work, she said, smiling. Oh? I asked. What did they say? That their mommy builds science that helps people who get forgotten. I blinked, pressed a hand to my chest. Yeah, I said quietly. That's about right. Back home, I opened a new document on my laptop. A project I'd been thinking about for months, early detection kits tailored for teens. Accessible, safe, anonymous. Especially for communities with no support systems. I titled the file, I See Me, Phase 1. Because that's what this was always about. Not just being seen for who I really am. As sunlight flooded across the kitchen table, it caught the edge of the sapphire ring. It glowed, like something alive, like something earned. And I thought, they didn't just erase me once. They underestimated what I would build when I came back. Now, they can't rewrite the story, because I already published it. Some stories end with justice. Mine kept growing. It had been 6 months since the court ruled in my favor. 6 months since Zenaya vanished from social media, public boards, interviews. Silence had swallowed her name in the places that once echoed with it. Not erasure, just absence. And in that space, I built. Phoenix Biotech had outgrown the community center office. We moved into a modest 2-story unit on the south side. No glass elevators or corporate fountains, just white walls, sunlight, and shelves full of lab equipment and scribbled ideas taped to every surface. The twins came with me most days. Leora had claimed a corner desk for her experiments, usually involving glitter and juice. Leo sat beside her with his toy microscope trying to name things he couldn't see. They didn't know it yet, but they were the very foundation we built upon. One afternoon, I received a handwritten note from Renee, my attorney. It was short. You're not just a client anymore. You're a story I tell. Keep going. I pinned it to the corkboard beside a Polaroid Camden had taken of me, holding the first production-ready box of hormone kits. My hair was in a messy bun. There was a baby bottle on the table, but I was smiling like I had just learned to breathe. Because in many ways I had. Then, one quiet Thursday, I got a message I wasn't expecting. Speaking opportunity, women in innovation. I almost deleted it. Thought it was another auto-blasted invite asking me to share a stage with women who had never been forced to build from ashes. But this time, it was from a high school. A public school outside of Flagstaff. The teacher who wrote it said she'd shown my keynote video to her STEM Girls Club. They wanted to know if I'd speak to them. Not in a stadium, not on a platform. In their gymnasium. I can't offer you a speaker's fee, she added, but we can give you a thank you note and a homemade pie. I said yes. Because sometimes the most important rooms don't come with stage lights. They come with folding chairs and shy smiles. Camden drove me and the twins to Flagstaff that weekend. The gym smelled like waxed floors and school lunches. The girls sat cross-legged on the bleachers, notebooks open on their laps, glitter pens in hand. I told them everything. Not just the science. The rejection, the lawsuit, the silence, the fire. I told them how I rebuilt not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because I wanted to prove myself right. At the end, one girl asked, "Do you still miss them? Your family?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I miss who I thought they were." She nodded, like she understood. She probably did. Afterward, I was handed a thank you card signed in a rainbow of gel pens and a blueberry pie wrapped in foil. I cried in the car, not because of sadness, but because something in me was finally soft enough to feel joy fully again. Weeks later, I returned to that same auditorium, not as a speaker, but as a guest in the audience. The girl who had asked me the hardest question, her name was Malia, had submitted her own biotech project to the state fair. She built a prototype using recycled plastics for hormone filtration in water. She placed second. But in my eyes, she won everything. Camden and I took the twins out for ice cream that night. Leora asked if we could get a lab puppy. Leo wanted a telescope instead. We said yes to both. Because joy isn't always practical, but it's always necessary. One Sunday afternoon, while cleaning out a filing cabinet in the lab, I found an old notebook. The spine was torn, pages stained. It was the notebook. The one I used to sketch the very first version of Phoenix Biotech. Inside was a note I didn't remember writing. If someday they'll ask where this all started, and you'll point here, not to pain, but to purpose. I closed the cover, set it gently on a shelf beside the first prototype box. Next to it, I placed a photo of Leo and Leora holding hands in front of our citrus trees. The lemon tree had bloomed. The orange hadn't yet, but they were both growing, just as they should. That night, Camden and I sat on the couch watching the twins build a blanket fort in the living room. It kept collapsing, but they kept rebuilding it, giggling and diving under the next pillow. He looked over at me. "You know what I realized?" he said. "What?" "You never went back for the ring." I smiled. "I didn't need to. It came to me." He nodded, then added, "You didn't go back for them either." "I didn't," I said, "but I did go forward for me." Later, after the twins fell asleep, tangled in fleece and fort remnants, I opened my laptop. A new message waited in my inbox. No sender name, no subject. Just a line. You win. No signature. But I knew. I stared at it for a moment, then clicked delete. I didn't need to reply, because I wasn't playing her game anymore. A few months later, Phoenix Biotech crossed a quiet milestone. Not one we celebrated with press releases or catered dinners, just a quiet shipment of our 10,000th early detection kit sent to a clinic on the outskirts of Yuma. The nurse who signed for it called later that week to say the first woman it helped had cried when she got her results, not because something was wrong, but because for once she knew what was happening inside her body before it was too late. I hung up and cried too. That's the kind of legacy I wanted. Not the kind built with spotlights or gala invitations. The kind built in silence, in usefulness, in truth. That same week, Camden found a dusty VHS tape while cleaning out an old box in storage, labeled in faint blue pen, Narina, age 6, science fair. He set up a USB converter and we watched it together on his laptop. The video was grainy, sound crackling every few seconds, but there I was, standing on a cafeteria stage in pigtails and scuffed shoes, holding a foam model of a cell with the words, "Cells are the boss," written in glitter glue. I stammered through my lines, dropped a pointer, picked it up and smiled. My parents had been in the audience that day. You could hear them clapping. But they weren't in the frame. And strangely, I didn't miss the minute. Because all I could see was her, little me, already choosing science over spotlights, already building something she couldn't yet name. Later that night, Camden asked, "If they called tomorrow and said they were sorry, what would you do?" I thought about it, about the years of silence, about the lawsuit, the letter, the photo, the ring. And then I said, "I think I'd say thank you." He raised an eyebrow. "Because if they hadn't erased me," I said, "I might have spent the rest of my life trying to fit into a frame that couldn't hold me." The next morning, I dropped Leo and Leora off at preschool. As they ran toward the jungle gym, Leora looked back and shouted, "We're gonna save the world, Mommy!" I smiled, waved. "You already are," I whispered. Back at home, I reviewed a grant application from a startup in another state. A young woman, mid-20s, proposing a new model for mobile hormone testing units for reservation communities. It was smart, scrappy, real. I sent her a funding offer, then wrote a note. "Let them underestimate you. Just make sure you build anyway." A few hours later, Camden texted me from the grocery store. "I check your mail, front porch." I opened the door. A small package sat at my feet. Inside, a framed version of the cropped birthday photo, but layered with the original beneath it. Me in my blue dress, smiling, restored. He'd had it professionally done. The edited and the real, side by side. He walked in a few minutes later, carrying paper bags full of cereal and apples and juice boxes. I held the frame up. "You're something else," I said. He shrugged. Just figured maybe it was time they sat next to each other. The lie and the truth. I hung it in the hallway that evening. Not out of spite, but to remember. Because sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring both the scar and the skin that grew over it. A few nights later, I sat in bed with my laptop, the twins curled on either side of me like commas in a long sentence. I opened a blank document, titled in Volume 2, The Blueprint Years. The second chapter of a story I never expected to tell. One built not from revenge, but from reclamation. Not from rage, but from resolve. Phoenix Biotech was expanding. Our pilot for teen-targeted kits, See Me, was already being tested in 3 high schools. Leora said she wanted to design the next box. Leo asked if he could name one of the molecules. I told him yes to both, because if the story begins with survival, its sequel is always creation. One morning, I got a letter in the mail, no envelope, just a folded piece of paper slipped into our lab's front door, in blocky, uneven handwriting. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll know I loved you in my own way. Mom. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it back up and slid it behind a photo of my kids on my desk. Not to forget it, just to place it where it belongs, behind the life I built, not inside it. Later that week, the twins had career day at preschool. Leora dressed up in a lab coat Camden had hemmed to her knees. Leo wore goggles and carried a test tube full of colored water. Their teacher sent me a photo, both of them smiling, standing tall. Underneath it, the caption, "And Mommy builds science." That night, I lay awake long after everyone else had fallen asleep. Not worried. Not scared. Just still. I thought about the motel, the neon sign, the test, the whisper in the mirror, "You're not alone." And now I had a chorus. I had a life. I had my name, spoken fully, without hesitation. Narina Sloan, mother, founder, author of my own damn story. And this time, there was no one left to crop me out.